going on, everyone? Matt McCarthy here for GR Weekly on a Monday, November 8th. Talking about some Week 9 review. And, what a week it was. I feel like every day we, on Mondays, we come in here and we talk about how we know nothing about football and we couldn't imagine the week planning out like that. But this was a real doozy. There was low-scoring games. There was bad offensive performances. If you had a fantasy team that scored over like 140 points without two quarterbacks, congratulations, because not a lot of people did. There was a lot of bad games, and we're going to get right into it. But as always, make sure to like and subscribe to the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel so you can find not only my show through these weeks at Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7:30 p.m. You always get Getting Defensive on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the slate on the weekend for all your DFS needs as well. And make sure to follow me at Methodical One and the Gridiron Ratings Twitter at Gridiron Rating, no S needed. So with that, we're going to get to the game. Atlanta versus New Orleans. Atlanta wins 27-25. Go Falcons. And we are off and running with a late comeback win in Ryan after a chalk week last week in a very poor performance. Turns in a top 5 performance here against New Orleans. Russell Gage, high target performance for him. Only needs Zacchaeus 2 scores. But we got to talk about Cordero Patterson, who's really definitely the focus for this Atlanta Falcons team. 4th string game at 50% or more offensive snaps. It turns in 136 yards. 60 of that came on that last drive. Who's going to say here or there? But it's very strange. Are we ever going to see him with a snap percentage north of 75% or so? Because he's not doing that. He's getting all this offensive production. He's still never been on the field for more than 75% of the offensive snaps. Now, he does play some of those snaps over on the special team sides, kick returns, and all that sort of like. But, man, we can really think of him as a top 12 type running back and top 16 or so wide receiver. There's a few wide receivers we're going to talk about later. Guys like, DJ Moore, guys like Mike Williams, Cordell Patterson. I would take rest of the season at this moment over guys like those two. Good schedule upcoming for Atlanta, Dallas, New Orleans, and then Jacksonville in the next 3. So definitely high on guys like Patterson and Kyle Pitts, as always, with no Cal Riley. Again, we have no more information about whether or not he's going to be playing in 2021. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to spend on that because we got to keep rolling along. And a lot of these games, there's not too much to talk about in terms of what we can take away as actual learning spots, as there's just a lot of wacky games, a lot of wacky fantasy performances. So we're going to talk about the most important stuff we can from these games. New Orleans announced very late over the weekend that we would be seeing Trevor Siemian start again, not Taysom Hill, although he was used in this game. Siemian was good. No issues really with his quarterback play. And Hill didn't even steal any sort of big work for him like he's known to do near the goal line or any sort of random passes he came in. I'm not sure if we're going to see Taysom Hill be the starter for this team in 2021. I'd expect him to be. But then again, I expect him to be the starter for this week. Again, if he were to start, he'd be a top 10 to 15 type guy. Nearest comparison to him would be a guy like Jalen Hurts. So if we ever do see Taysom Hill actually become the starting quarterback like we expected him to do, that's kind of my idea of where he would be. What we need to talk about, though, for them besides the quarterbacks is this running backfield. Excuse me. Mark Ingram really factoring into this backfield right now a lot more than I expected. So I just got I don't know what. I must have swallowed my spit halfway through before. Oh, we're dying out here. All right. So 17 total touches for Kamara in this game to Ingram's 14. That's up from a 22-8 split last week. Around 30% of snaps in both games. So that's pretty big, though, in terms of he's seeing 14 touches on, around 30% of the offensive snaps. That's pretty huge. If Ingram's on the field, he's getting the ball. Now, 5 carries from Ingram, all on the Atlanta side of the field. No touches over there through the air. Kamara, 7 carries. So at least when they're getting into red zone or opposing side of the field opportunities, chances where you have a higher chance to score, it is Alvin Kamara getting the ball there, not Mark Ingram. As long as that stays true, then we're at least not overly concerned that there's a disaster on our hands. But Mark Ingram, we're looking for running back work. Guys like Mark Ingram, we're talking about a guy like Kenyon Drake. There's some situations popping up at backfields where we need to start thinking of the secondary running back. You're seeing NFL teams prioritize 2 backs more and more often. Mark Ingram, going from a guy who was not even rosterable in Houston, I think should be looked at on the waiver wire this week going into week 10 as a player you can pick up and possibly use as a low-end RB2. I'm going to be looking at him as such going forward, unless anything really changes in week 10 or onward, that we're not going to be seeing the sort of work like he's getting in this last week, because it's a real ramp up from his first week production with New Orleans Saints. Cleveland versus Cincinnati. Cleveland pulls away on this one 41-16, one of the biggest wins on the week. But with defensive measures and Chubb dominating, not really too much to see from this whole game on either side of the ball for Cleveland or Cincinnati purposes. Continuing not to really love the Cleveland pass attack, right? Even though Peoples-Jones does have the 60-yard score, that's not happening every single week. We know that. But Chubb and Hunt are going to be remaining the only players I really like to start from the Cleveland Browns once we go forward with Hunt returning. We wrote about this actually last year about the Cleveland Browns, where without Odell Beckham Jr. after he got hurt in 2020, they started to form into a very game control, use your defense, use your run game, make it so Baker Mayfield can't produce turnovers, can't really lose you the game, just have him be comfortable in this Cleveland offense. Now, it worked very well for them last year, getting him to a playoffs. But here in 2021, I'm expecting the same sort of play style. We go and see his PFF's number one rated quarterback of the week, 14-21, 200 something yards, 2 scores, and no turnovers. I guess will do that to you. He didn't really have a particularly great game. He just didn't turn over the ball, which was something that almost every other quarterback did on the week. So that's neither here nor there, I think, in terms of what that rating may be. I saw some people saying, the Baker haters are hating the week he just had. I don't think it was anything impressive. It was just a bad week, and he wasn't coinciding with that. Over on the Cincinnati side of the ball, 35 minutes of offense for Cincinnati. So a little bit inflated sort of statistics in terms of targets and numbers. Didn't really amount to a whole lot for them, though. 5 sacks allowed, 4 turnovers. Outside of Mixon, no one really had a good fantasy day on paper in terms of relative to the amount of plays they were running. But Chase, you do have a touchdown drop on that. That really sucks. No real downgrade from me, though. He's still a top 12 guy. He's, I believe, third or second in terms of yards at receiver on the season. The only guys up there would be Deebo Samuel and Cooper Kupp around him. Denver versus Dallas. This is one of the 2 strangest games of the week. Denver wins 30-16. All that 16 points came in mega ultra late garbage time. The game was well in hand. So what happened here, right? That punt return situation, I don't even want to speak about that. But another near 50% split for Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. Both continue to be great RB2 options to me. I still lean Gordon than Williams. They lean Gordon than Williams. So if you have either of them, you're pretty happy with the results. I'd assume you're more mad if you're a Javonte Williams manager, because you drafted him and you expected him to take this backfield all for himself. 2022, 100%. Javonte Williams is going to be second, third, whatever round pick for sure. But in 2021, they're really liking using both guys, spreading the ball around, using them when they see fit for that matter, and not really need for a ton of passing production in this game, which led to them having just such an overwhelming amount of work for both players. Sutton, though, third straight week of poor production is quite disappointing. But again, this was not particularly a game where they needed a lot of passing work. Tim Patrick was the real big guy in terms of through the air for them. For Denver, different story going forward. I like to see a little more Sutton. Just a game where it was just very much well in hand right from the get-go, really. Dallas, they had the ball for 18 minutes in this game. Malik Turner scored both their touchdowns way, way late in the game. I'm not going to be talking too much what I think about Dak or the receiving game. This is not a spot where I want to take a 1-game sample size in a very weird game. Any given thing can happen on any given Sunday. And Dallas winning a 10.5-point spread favorite falls to Denver here. It's just weird stuff. But Ezekiel Elliott, right? Knee contusion. If he doesn't miss time, cool. That's just annoying. He's going to try and play with it. But otherwise, if he's not able to play, Tony Pollard, of course, shoots up, the ranking list real quick. If he is out there on waivers, he is another priority. I'm not expecting him to be. When Christian McCaffrey was activated, which we're going to get into just a little bit, people are asking about Trouba Hubbard. I would not drop Hubbard. I would not be dropping any running back. Maybe the Houston Texans guys, because that's never happening. But to be able to have a team good enough to be dropping running backs is not a situation I see as a very apt thing to do. We're at the point right now where, you don't want to, just because a player is healthy this week does not mean they're going to be healthy next week. Just hold on to these running backs, have a nice deep roster of guys, because anything can change. we can have big injuries happen or situations change on a dime. So don't drop those players. That's not recommended at all. Houston versus Miami, our next one. And I actually forgot to even get the score for this one. Let me just take a look real quick. Houston falling 17-9 to the Miami Dolphins. Good for Miami to beat the Texans. But I'll start on with Houston. Even against the 1-win Dolphins coming to this game, they showed they're one of the worst teams in the league. Houston, Taylor, returning did very little to improve this offense. One of the worst interceptions I've ever seen to end the first half. And Cooks really just remains the only option for fantasy on this team, like bar none. I'm hoping for better work from Taylor, taking the amount of sacks and interceptions he did. Big day for the Miami defense. But you can probably drop any other Texans you have. This was a really bad showing from Taylor and this Houston Texans offense. They're really, really trying to lose, it seems. Over on this Miami side, with hours to go, Miami rules out Tua Tagovailoa for the game with a small fracture in his finger. Brissett did well enough just, to lead guys like Gesicki and Waddle to have fine days, hoping for a little bit better. Obviously, with Tua Tagovailoa, that was a guy we would have had as a top 12 quarterback for sure. But Gaskin, hefty 20 carries in this game for just a measly 34 yards. Yikes, but a score and 6 receptions did lead to him to have a better start than Michael Carter. That was one of my real risky calls of the week, but it comes through for me here, so it's nice to be right on that one. Las Vegas versus New York Giants just need we're getting into the cold season. Maybe I just picked up a cold. Who knows? Las Vegas versus New York Giants. Giants win this one 23-16 off the back of the nice pick six that they had. I think it was like 4 pick sixes happening in week 9 because that was the week we had. But by hook or by crook, with the Las Vegas Raiders, Drake has been a viable running back option for the good part of a month. That does good for, us in a world we have not a good amount of running back options. And Drake, Drake and Jacobs, again, the contracts they have, they're going to both be used a good amount by this Raiders offense. He has now outscored the lead running back, Josh Jacobs, 3 straight weeks. Next week's versus Kansas City. At the very least, Drake will be considered a low RB2 type option, I think, with such a good matchup in that Kansas City defense. And it'll be close if, not for, it's going to be to see really what Jacobs is going to do, because I still think of him as the lead back and I'd rank him higher, but Drake has been playing better of the two. And I think it'd be way too, bold of a call to say Drake over Jacobs in week 10. But I'm considering putting them very close back-to-back, if even. Both really good spots for me. Darren Waller, always a great player. Hunter Renfrow, it's nice to see him getting into the end zone. Or to the Giants. Great big hurrah for Devontae Booker, possibly on his way out with the resume return of Saquon Barkley after the Week 10 bye. Giants played a very slow down type of attack in this one. They didn't really need to. They worked well off their defense. They were controlling the game. Raiders were able to get a lot of good offensive measures going for them. But Galle and Tony combined for 3 targets. That's not something I want to see week to week. I want to see this team really looks like at full strength. Hopefully by sometime before the end of 2021, we get at least a majority of Barkley, Ingram, Galladay, Shepard, and Tony. If we can have just like 4 or 5 of those guys, that would be nice. This is a very deep offense, oddly, and they just have never been on the field together. It's so strange. New England versus Carolina. New England wins this game. 24-6 was a game that I did not like at all going into the week, and one of the sides did not really produce any sort of good measures at all. Starting on New England, not a lot to talk about. They ran the ball a ton. They controlled Carolina on the defensive side of the ball. Hunter Henry really remains the only receiving option I really want to start. Jacoby Myers has been a low flex option. He'll continue to be a low flex option, as my idea on Jonnu Smith from the preseason continues to just burn wildly. He has been very, very, very disappointing. Carolina, on the other hand, I did not like this game going in with very few players I wanted to start, and we got just that. But except Christian McCaffrey did in fact play in this one. He was active over the weekend. We didn't know if he would start. He does start here for the Carolina Panthers. And he plays nearly 50% of the offensive snaps and immediately out of the gate. I do not like that. I don't like that at all. I do like the 100 total yards that came from it, but I don't like how much work he's getting straight out of the gate, possibility for re-injuring himself. We just saw this last year, and they're doing the exact same thing again, and I hate it. 3 times as many snaps as Trouba Hubbard. Really only source production for this on the offense on the team was Christian McCaffrey. And I'll still never forget when I was told that Sam Darnold over Brady rest of the season. I'll never say who said that, but that was still just shocking then, shocking now. And it's just never Robbie Anderson's day for sure. But DJ Moore, I'm just not going to consider him a wide receiver 1 anymore. I didn't rank him as such going this week. I had him around wide receiver 15 or so. But now the idea that's Christian McCaffrey, you have two camps. One, the offense should be relatively better, even though Hubbard has done the best impression that he can of Christian McCaffrey. He's been playing, I think, very well. But two, the idea with as much work as he's gone, 7 targets every single game, how much better can he get? He should have already been producing well if he's playing so well. You should be at least turning it. If you're going to get 7 targets, catch 5, maybe 15 yards a piece, you should be getting towards 75 yards. And he has not been able to put in a 75-yard game for over a month now. Carolina really, for me, just disintegrating all over the place. I very much am disappointed in what they've been really producing. Sam Darnold, that experiment has just seemingly not worked out whatsoever. Buffalo versus Jacksonville, one of the biggest upsets like in recent NFL history. Jacksonville wins 9-6. Okay. At least when I said that no Jacksonville player should be starting this game because Darren Arnold was the leading scorer with like 9 or 10 fantasy points. At least I got that part right. I'm taking nothing away from the Buffalo side of the ball outside of Zach Moss. Does have a concussion. Should be a boost to Devin Singletary as the lone running back possibly next week if he's the only one out there. But, man. I don't know. I'm not taking anything else away from it. I have nothing to say about just one of the worst games I've ever seen of offense and a team that is supposed to be a contender for the Super Bowl and really one of the better teams in the whole AFC conference. This was wildly shocking. Minnesota versus Baltimore, winning this one in overtime. I believe it was no one to put the score 34-31. There we go. A weird game. Few things. Jefferson, early big score, then completely non-existent from into this game. Thielen, non-existent until the last moment of the game where he scores, which completely saves his day. Adam Thielen continues to be a player I'm going to be under-ranking because he's not producing well at all. Could be tough going for these wide receivers going forward as well. Matchups against the Chargers, Green Bay, and San Francisco coming up. I do not like those matchups for wide receivers pretty much at all. And Dalvin Cook has only scored 4 times this season, 2 apiece in 2 separate games. His usage is elite, but without having the scoring ceiling that players of his real pedigree should be having, it definitely takes him down a little bit compared to the other elite players. Guys like Kamara, guys like Taylor, I would definitely consider over him right now. It's just me how much, with Elliott and whatever the list is. The list is not very long of elite players, and it's just kind of annoying, though, for Dalvin Cook. Over to Baltimore. The overtime game did add some overall stats to these players, but Jackson with a 250 passing yard, 100-yard rushing game. There's a few records he set in this one. I believe it ties Cam Newton for the most all time with that type of record line. The receiving options for the Ravens are possibly going to get this team over the hump. Lamar Jackson, if him, Bateman, Brown, and Andrews are rocking and rolling, I think this is really, I know right now the Tennessee Titans are the number 1 seed in the AFC. But the Bills and the Ravens are really my favorites, and I really, really like this passing. I'm going to be still very bullish on what this Ravens pass attack could be if all cylinders are going. Just a lot of annoyance in this game, though, in terms of the scoring. Freeman and Bell both score. Patrick Ricard scores, the fullback. Devin Duvernay scores. But what about, Andrews, Brown, and Bateman? I'd like them to score. That'd be nice. Brown picks up 5 receptions of 47 yards in overtime, pretty much doubles his score for the day. The other 2 did nothing, but they all played big snaps. Season high for 66% for Rashad Bateman. Very much love this Ravens pass attack. Going to keep being really bullish on them. Just having a lot of annoyances, but that was unfortunately the overall theme of the day, was just a lot of unlucky plays and games. Chargers versus Philadelphia, just got a few games left as we're into the 4 o'clock games, trying to get out here about 10 minutes or so. Chargers versus Philadelphia, Chargers win this game 27-24. Besides a huge Cleveland game, right? And we need to talk about 2 players, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, where 89 total points were scored in that game. Here are the other 4 games combined for these 2 receivers. For Mike Williams, 19 targets, 7 receptions, 115 yards, no scores. Compared to Keenan Allen, 40 targets, 30 receptions, 267 yards and 1 scored. Allen, 2 red zone targets compared to Mike Williams 0. They're not being used in that regard at all. We really can't compare them in that sort of sense. But do we have 2020 and prior Mike Williams showing his face where he has big games? Unfortunately, all just kind of came right at the front. So we thought it was Mike Williams' season. And unfortunately, for a guy who has really not produced at all over the course of a month, this stinks. But I am no longer considering DJ Moore, and I am no longer considering Mike Williams as wide receiver ones. They're not producing. They're not producing for me to say these are locked in wide receiver ones. These have been disappointing players. Keenan Allen has very much set himself aside as the undeniably best option in this receiving game in LA, hands down. Over on the Philadelphia side, it's going to continue to be sort of an annoyance in terms of what this overall offense is going to be. Under 175 passing yards from Hurts, but again, he still adds 62 rushing yards on the ground. That's going to be what he is, for worse or for better. Devonta Smith having the huge fantasy game here, 116 yards and a score. And Kenneth Gainwell, he gets in there for a 2-yard score. But Howard and Boston Scott, for some odd reason, are the preferred options in this Eagles backfield. I really don't want to start any of them. I don't. Because going into the game, it was Boston Scott and Howard and Gainwell were back to back. And when it comes out of it, the Howard, then Gainwell with that 2-yard score had better games than the presumed starter of Boston Scott. I'm not trusting any of them. I don't recommend them as starts. Philadelphia just continues to just be annoying in that sense. It's Goddard and Smith, who I'd like to trust, and then Jalen Hurts. And then that's kind of it. I don't want to look anything else from this Philadelphia Eagles team. Green Bay versus Kansas City. Kansas City wins 13-7. Green Bay, really not much to talk about. Green Bay was pretty brutal because Jordan Love was pretty brutal. Not going to take anything away from this team until Aaron Rodgers returns. He should return. I'm not going to say too much else into that. But I assume when he's back, everything's rocking and rolling. They fed Devonta Adams, but it wasn't quality work. Kansas City. If Rodgers plays this game, Kansas City loses by a ton because they play terribly. This is just a terrible, terrible stretch of games for the entire Kansas City offense. If Kelsey doesn't score in this game, there should be a brutal game for the whole collective of the main trio. But Mahomes, 2 total touchdowns over the last 3 games, 1 game of plus 300 yards passing since week 2. Kelsey's been pretty terrible down the stretch for Travis Kelsey, right? Only second time he has scored since week 2. And Kelsey's been turning in, 11 and 13 type points games in PPR, but that's not really what you would have thought and wanted to when you went out and drafted him in the first round. Now, during the preseason, I was looking at these 2 players, and Kelsey is one thing. I was looking at a player in the last 4 or 5 seasons, he's been the number 1 tight end just locked in. But now he's 30. He's like 31 to 32 now, coming off his best statistical season. Now he's pushed to be a locked in first round pick. I was looking at this, and it seems like if there was ever going to have a season where there's a downturn on him, it would be this year. He's just getting older. I was not in on him. I considered him one of the worst first-round picks, considering whatever the injuries and other sort of situations going on. He's not. But in terms of what his production has been, I don't think Kelsey was worth that first rounder at all. Mahomes was always a bad pick at his price in the preseason, because when you had this other elite starter group of Jackson and Allen and Murray, Wilson was very good, Rodgers is good, and Herbert is good. You have all these very excellent players. Mahomes having the highest billing was always going to fall flat on his face because you needed to have just a much better production than any of the other guys. So now with Mahomes, you're looking at, if you have him, it's a real detriment to your team. I'm not ranking him as a top 5 quarterback, and I didn't rank him as such going into this week. Unfortunately, my quarterback rankings for Fantasy Pros has disappeared for the third time this season. I do not know why, but I did not have him as a top 5 quarterback. I'm probably not going to consider him a top 5 quarterback until I see it. And it's very strange because it's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, but this offense has been bad, and there's really no other way to talk about it. Moving on to the Arizona Cardinals versus San Francisco 49ers. Arizona wins 31-17. James freaking Conner, the best fantasy scorer on the week. And now it's who knows how much work he's going to get, because we have Chase Edmonds out for an extended period of time with a high ankle sprain. Now, a few things also led to this. No Kyler Murray, no DeAndre Hopkins as well. and Edmonds leaving, within the first few plays of the game. Few short fields from San Francisco. They had no idea how to stop him on offense. Connor is an RB2. He's going to be an RB2, and I'm going to try and push him as high as I can to be, top 15 sort of guy going forward until we see Edmonds or anything change. He was, it turned in undeniably his best game of the season, one of his best games since he, going back to last year as a Pittsburgh Steeler. So I really, really, really don't want to put too much into him saying, top 5 guy, overall or anything. But for right now, he's one of the better running back options that we came out of this week, in terms of on the ups. Stock up 100% for him. Really like what I can see out of him if they really try to focus on giving Connor as much work as possible. Benjamin would be a pickup off waivers if you're looking to take anything else from that running back group out of this game. Otherwise, again, it was a very bad, not a particularly spot performance we were looking to see out of Colt McCoy. It was just the James Conner show, and he really showed up, and San Francisco had no way to stop him. Over to San Francisco. Bad defensive showing, but we need to talk about what they did with Kittle and Ayuk in this game, because that is the big talk. I think Deebo Samuel got hurt because they both had the big days that they did. Even with Ayuk fumbling, he does get into the end zone, and they trusted him. So if there's ever going to be a spot that we can start getting some confidence on Ayuk, hopefully this is the game to leap forward that, because they got to start winning games and want to stay competitive this season. Otherwise, Kittle playing 75% of his snaps on his first game back. I thought he was on a pitch count. I think this is wildly inappropriate for him to be playing that many snaps in the first game back, just like Christian McCaffrey. Goes out there and fumbles as well. That's neither here nor there. But I do not like what I saw out of him or McCaffrey from their teams utilizing them so much in their first games back. And Jeff Wilson did not factor in at all. If this stays that way, Elijah Mitchell going to be an RB1 rest of the season. Gets involved in the passing game in this game as well, which is something we were not seeing, especially last week when he had like 130 total yards. None of that came from receiving. It was just pure rushing numbers. If they're going to get him out in space and catching passes, his ceiling is going to climb up, and I really, really like that. And let's finish this one off because I want to get out here in a half hour or so, like keeping these things to like a half hour now. Tennessee versus the LA Rams. Tennessee wins 28-16. Back-to-back picks are a bad way to lose a game because that's exactly what Matthew Stafford did. And really, you got to go out in week 9 with a real banger. That really killed this game in all ways on both sides of the ball. The main receiving options for LA in Woods, Kupp, and Higbee all see double-digit targets, which is why I'm a little puzzled about Van Jefferson. A lot of people were saying it was now Van Jefferson's season with the departure of Deshaun Jackson, who is now a Las Vegas Raider. I think he'd take a jump, not a huge jump, but I wouldn't be pushing him towards any sort of flex consideration. But I need to pay attention to Darrell Henderson. Comes out the game, leaves, comes back. If he's still hurt, Sonny Michel going to be a priority. Get him out on waivers. Over to the Tennessee side, didn't require massive offensive production when you have a short yardage touchdown and a naked boot touchdown for Ryan Tannehill back, and then a pick 6. But Stafford play, with his being poor as it was, we still saw good target numbers for AJ Brown. He is way and far beyond what Julio Jones is for now, for sure. But that running back usage was very spread out. Peterson leads the way in touches, not in snaps. That was McNichols. And McNichols, I like to think of, if we had a more competitive game, I tend to believe he'd be more involved than what Peterson was, even though Peterson does come away with a score in this game. Remember, Peterson is 36. I'm not expecting him to carry that workload like Derrick Henry was. This now became 3 players instead of 2, because Deontay Foreman did factor into this game as well. Something to just consider for the Titans going forward. And with that, let's try and get out of here because I want to get out here in a half hour and keep these things nice and clean and short. With that, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like and subscribe over on the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. And if this is the first time or last time you spent your time with me, I very much enjoy it. Rankings out on Tuesdays, back here on Wednesday to preview week 10. And let's see how this Steelers-Chicago game goes down. With that, have a good rest of your day.